almost no one raises the real issue of tax avoidance, right? And of the rich just not paying their fair share. I mean, it feels like I'm at a firefighters conference and no one's allowed to speak about water.
Today we walk into this house with an iconic South African plant, the Alu Ferox. We must take the bitter with the sweet.
It is a matter that is under consideration, and all I would say is that watch this space.
Welcome to this week's episode of the SA Money Report. This financial podcast is brought to you by Fin24 and hosted by Deputy Editor Ahmed Arif.
Hello and welcome to another episode of SA Money Report. I'm your host, Fin24 Deputy Editor Ahmed Arif. Usually every week we have an episode that consists of bite-sized samples of some of the week's biggest and most talked about financial and business news. Usually. This week, one of our reporters will help us peek behind the curtain at our biggest story this week and unpack it for us. This all began in 2017 with Markus Jooste's shock resignation as CEO of the global furniture and household goods company. This led to a catastrophic collapse of his share price, which wiped out 200 billion rand from Steinhoff's market capitalization amid what was at the time described as accounting irregularities. Since then, Steinhoff has been trying to crawl out of the wreckage to rebuild, and must still reckon with investors who lost tens of billions of rands in the share price collapse, and issues of fraud allegedly linked to Jooste and others. Meanwhile, Jooste is apparently chilling and watching whales at his 81 million rand seaside home in Hermanus, probably without a care in the world, especially since he says he's done nothing wrong. But things appear to be taking a big leap forward with a case filed against UK businessman Malcolm King, who seems to be Jooste's big buddy. Helping us to unpack why this case is important is the person who actually broke that story about Malcolm King, Fin24 investigative reporter Jan Cronje. Jan, so tell us, who is Malcolm King? And according to Steinhoff, how does he fit into the broader puzzle of what happened there?
So King is a British businessman who appears to have been friendly with former Steinhoff CEO Markus Jooste for up to 2 decades. Now, he's probably best known to South Africans as the supposed owner of Landskroon wine estate outside Stellenbosch, which he apparently bought from Christo Wiese roughly a decade ago as the head of a consortium. Now, King, his son Nicholas, who I believe still sits on Landskroon's board, and a company they own have been sued in an English court by Steinhoff for around 1.6 billion for allegedly defrauding Steinhoff with Markus Jooste.
While this case is specifically about King, and they're saying that he's worked with Markus, how does Markus fit into everything? I mean, aside from this, what cases, charges, fines is he currently facing here in SA and elsewhere? And also, is this case against King sort of the first step in more criminal charges against Jooste?
That's an interesting question, Ahmed. You're quite right that this case that has been lodged in England is specifically about King, his son, and their company called Formal Holdings, but it does reference Jooste repeatedly, but he's not been named as one of the accused. And I can't exactly say why not. It could be that Jooste is not a UK citizen, or that he's facing similar charges in other jurisdictions. But in any case, Jooste is, himself facing plenty of charges, and I'm just going to mention a couple here, the most important ones. First, he is facing a German criminal complaint related to balance sheet fraud. That case has not started yet. Then he's been fined over 100 million by the Financial Sector Conduct Authority here in South Africa for insider trading. He's appealed that one, and we're still waiting to see what happens next. Then he's the subject of a long-running probe by the Hawks here in South Africa, although they've not specifically named him yet as an accused. But there's nothing strange about that. They only name their accused right at the end of their investigative process. So they'll do that later, if indeed he is one of the accused, which we all expect. And then lastly, Steinhoff itself wants him to pay back all the bonuses and other things that he received over the years as CEO in something called a clawback proceeding. That case also hasn't started yet. So, Ahmed, these are just 4 of the cases he's facing. There are more kind of private civil claims, but those are the big ones.
Earlier in this conversation, Jan, you mentioned that you mentioned the historic Landskroon wine estate, and you have reported on this before. So can you help us understand this complicated ownership story with the estate and what Jooste's role in it is?
So for quite a while, there have been rumors circulating in Stellenbosch amongst people that, used to move in Jooste's circle, that he has been seen at Landskroon. And he's even hosted birthday bashes and birthday parties there. Now, I don't know if these are true or not. I haven't been able to independently verify one way or another. But in any case, it now appears that Jooste is closely linked to Landskroon, or even owns a part or all of it, at least according to 2 lawsuits. I think we have to say now that Jooste's lawyer has said that his client has no comment on this, so we don't have Jooste's side of the story yet. We're probably going to get that when the lawsuits are argued, if they are argued in court. But in any case, this matter harks back to the King matter in the English court. There, Steinhoff is alleging that Jooste is the owner of a company registered in the British Virgin Islands that actually owns Landskroon. Now, that's the first time that, to our knowledge, someone has made this claim specifically in a legal document. Previously, and we've been looking into Landskroon for a while, as you know, Landskroon had said that Malcolm King owns this company in the British Virgin Islands. So that is the link with the King case, and there's more news about Jooste's links to Landskroon regarding a claim put in by Christo Wiese.
So tell us about this new case with Wiese and Jooste, specifically about around Landskroon.
Wiese, last year, in February last year, put in a claim in the Western Cape High Court. Now, he was joined by a number of companies, but these appeared to be companies that he represented. And he is stating that Markus Jooste bought Landskroon from him kind of under false pretenses. Now, this is quite big news, because up until now, the official word was that Malcolm King owned Landskroon. And although people knew that Jooste had been involved in negotiations with Wiese to sell Landskroon, the story had been that Jooste was just acting on behalf of an international consortium. He wasn't himself personally involved. But what Wiese is claiming in these court docs is that Jooste was actually acting on his own behalf and is himself the owner of Landskroon. Now, that is similar to what was claimed by Steinhoff in its court case in the UK. Wiese is claiming that he wants Landskroon returned to him, or he wants a payout of whatever the court believes Landskroon and all its assets are worth. Again, we don't know Jooste's reply to this. We don't know when or whether he's going to give his side of the story, but we do know that he and the company that owns Landskroon, something called Landskroon Estate Investments, have said that they will oppose Wiese's claim, but they haven't put their replying affidavit in yet.
This case against King comes about 2 years after Steinhoff received the findings of a 16-month forensic probe into the allegations of fraud there. Obviously, this probe was done by PwC. So while the full report hasn't been made public, how do what little findings we do know about relate to this case specifically, and more broadly to things you have reported on as an investigative reporter looking into Steinhoff?
Right. I mean, you're right there that PwC report is absolutely vital, and it has not been made public yet. What it was is right after Jooste resigned and Steinhoff's share price absolutely fell off a cliff, Steinhoff hired PwC to do a forensic investigation into what may have gone wrong. Remember, at the time, they were just talking about accounting irregularities. Eventually, it turned out to have been far more than just that. But anyway, PwC completed this report and gave it to Steinhoff. But it has not been made public, although it has been given to the Hawks. What Steinhoff has done is it's given a 10-11 page overview of what the report contained. The actual report, we think, is thousands and thousands of pages. But in any case, what is being claimed by Steinhoff in the English lawsuit against King and what we read in the overview of the PwC report is fairly similar. And it is that a small clique, a small group of top Steinhoff bosses ordered that money be paid from Steinhoff into fake or dud or shell companies that they had an interest in. So at the time, they would tell everyone that these were legitimate business transactions, and people would essentially follow their lead, because if the CEO tells you to do something, you do it. But it later turned out that these companies were controlled by people related to the Steinhoff bosses, and particularly the person that's been fingered is Jooste, as well as one or two others. So they are accused of being on both sides of these deals. Now, what happened to that money afterwards, we don't know, and I guess that's up to the Hawks and the German prosecutors. That is something that they'll have to explain if these cases do go to court. Jooste has denied that he did anything wrong. But apart from an appearance in Parliament in 2018, he has said absolutely nothing to the media. So we haven't really had a chance to hear his side of the story and how he intends to explain away these accusations that on the face of it look, extremely serious.
So yeah, there's so many sort of moving parts and things that are still happening and ongoing regarding Steinhoff. So what's on the near horizon for us around Steinhoff, and how much closure are these processes expected to bring to the saga?
Yes, there are absolute tidal wave of lawsuits, and there's kind of complicated legal maneuvering behind the scenes regarding Steinhoff. On the one side, we have what we've just talked about now, the civil and criminal complaints against people that were part of Steinhoff or friends of Jooste, like Malcolm King, allegedly. But on the other side, we have something called the Steinhoff's Global Settlement Proposal. And I guess that's the most important thing happening now outside of the criminal cases. And that's Steinhoff's plan to pay out about 25 billion rand to people who lost out in its share price crash. So this, if it does go ahead, is going to be by far the biggest payout in South Africa's history. I believe it's going to be one of the biggest that's taken place by a European firm. Steinhoff is although it's got these long South African roots, it's domiciled in the Netherlands. And what Steinhoff is essentially saying to its former shareholders is that we will pay you out a fraction of your losses. Now this depends on what class the shareholders have been put into, between 10% to upwards of 20%. And you, in turn, stop suing us. So you essentially sign away your right to sue Steinhoff in the future about the share price plunge, and then they pay you out a section of your verified claim. You have to put a claim in. And I believe that the vote on this is going to happen next month, and we'll see what happens. Steinhoff has been saying that it believes that it's got a good chance that the vote will pass, because one of the largest groups that was publicly opposing it is more amenable to voting yes for it. You could put it in that way. So we'll have to see what happens.
Fantastic. Thanks for your time, Jan.
Thank you, Ahmed.
This brings our show to an end. The music in this episode is courtesy of Getty Images and Epidemic Sound. This week's installment was produced with the help of Kayleen Morgan. Thanks for listening.